All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Oak, here with Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
I'm pretty good, Alan. I would like to take this opportunity to officially remove myself from consideration for the New Orleans Saints head coaching position
It's because Mickey Loomis, right? You
because of
can't take
Mickey
it anymore.
Loomis. Yeah,
That's right. So they get
no
rid of Mickey
coaches want to
Loomis.
coach there.
That's right. That's exactly it. Well, I'm wearing my Pro Bowl jersey because it's Pro Bowl weekend and weekend before the Super Bowl. I mean, 2 weekends before the Super Bowl. The Senior Bowl is this weekend as well, which is kind of weird because Jari Evans and a few of the Saints assistant coaches who haven't
Hmm.
left for elsewhere because of Mickey Loomis are at the game,
Yeah.
and they're going to be scouting players for the Saints, but we don't even know if these guys will be back with the new coach. So it's really odd how this is going to work. I think Jari Evans will be here as an assistant, some sort of an assistant,
Yeah.
if they don't turn him into a scout outright. But the big news that happened this weekend, Joe Brady pulled his name out. And we were, including you and I, we were all pretty much convinced that he was the guy, that this is the guy they wanted to bring in as head coach. And he just pulled his name out. And then the next thing happened today. Kliff Kingsbury also pulled his name out of consideration. And the Saints are the only team that's left that's looking for a head coach. So people are immediately jumping on the whole, well, nobody wants to coach this team because the roster's old. They've got, salary cap issues. They don't have a quarterback, all these issues. And it's the excuse that now that no one wants to be there. But they flew out Monday to Philadelphia to interview Kellen Moore. He didn't pull his name out.
Hmm.
Mike McCarthy, Anthony Weaver still had their names in. Rizzi apparently came out with PowerPoints and everything else and laid out this incredibly detailed plan of how he would fix the Saints.
Well, listen, he had to if he had any kind of chance. So
Right. I mean, he went above and beyond. I'm surprised he didn't hand out pencils and pens with Rizzi as head coach of the Saints while you were on the way out here. I went y'all take all these things. I mean, it was just one of those things that, he's putting it all out there. He wants to coach. He wants to be the head coach. So what do you make of all this? I mean, Joe Brady kind of, if you want to blame Aaron Glenn and say, well, I'm glad we didn't get Aaron Glenn. Look at that crap performance he put out there for Detroit against Washington. We're not going to go into the officiating, but you didn't use Cook on the two most important drives of the game. He was averaging almost 6 yards a carry or something ridiculous like that. You could have used Cook on those third and fourth downs rather than try and use Allen. So Brady didn't call that good of a game against Kansas City.
no, I actually thought he called an atrocious game. I'd be, and I'm not soured on either Aaron Glenn or Joe Brady because of one playoff performance. But if I were to be, I'd be more ticked off at Joe Brady than I was Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn didn't have any players left. Joe Brady, we talked about the Baltimoreans, how stupid they become in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo does the same damn thing every time they play Kansas City. We're just going to hand the ball to Josh Allen and play superhero ball because that's always worked for us before. Well, no, it hasn't. It hasn't. And because of that, I'd be more soured on Joe Brady. But as far as what the Saints, a large portion of the Saints fan base is saying about nobody wants to coach here. Listen, if that were the case with Aaron Glenn and if that were the case with Joe Brady, they wouldn't have accepted virtual interviews to begin with. Plain and simple. Glenn basically got an offer that he couldn't refuse. And Brady, you got to believe, had second thoughts and feels like he can boost his coaching stock a little bit more with more year under Josh Allen, instead of stepping into a questionable situation with a questionable quarterback situation and questionable this, questionable that. So I don't blame either guy. And Kliff Kingsbury, he's still trying to rebuild his stock too. If I were Kliff, and remember, the Saints haven't had, to my knowledge, the Saints have not had any official discussions with Kliff Kingsbury at all up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm Kliff and you're not coming to me until now, I'm not prepared for you and you are not prepared for me. I think I'm just going to stay where I'm at.
Yeah, and that was part of the thing for me. If I'm going to be a conspiracy theorist, I'm thinking that Brady is holding out for the Bengals job. He thinks that one more bad season in Cincinnati, and I've got a great shot of reuniting myself with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
I can redo what I did in 2019 with the LSU Tigers. That's how I'm going to sell myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, clearly these guys are looking at career opportunities. These are opportunities I may have in the future because these teams didn't fire their guys. They stuck with them for one more year. If it goes south, think about the Chargers job, for example. We all thought that Peyton was going to get the Chargers job. He went into that coaching cycle knowing that if I don't go now, I probably am not going to get my pick of the team that I would like to get. So I'm going to take Denver's job now, but the job he really wanted was probably the Chargers job because he had the quarterback he wanted, he had the receivers, he had a team that was kind of built to go, whereas Denver was a lot like New Orleans, had a quarterback with a huge cap figure and needed a lot of work around him. He weren't going to be building a team long term around Russell Wilson. Just like whoever gets hired for the Saints is not building a team long term around Derek Carr. So you're looking at a team, a situation where you're going to have to do some work and you're going to look bad for a little while before it looks better. And I think that's kind of turned off a guy like Brady because he doesn't want to put the work in. Not that I'm saying he's lazy, although that's how it comes across to me. But
same.
He wants to step into a situation where he can look like the magician, much like John Gruden did when he came into Tampa Bay. He's the magician that's going to get them over the hump. He's not the guy that's going to build a team from the ground up. And I don't blame him. I mean, if I had my choice, that's what I would look at too. Which job requires me to do the least amount of work to get to winning, get over the hump.
The quickest path to success.
Yeah. So I'm not looking at a situation like the Patriots situation, for example, Jared Mayo, where I'm coming in, and if I'm not winning right away, then they're going to be looking at somebody else who looks like you could win right away. So that's kind of how I view the situation with those guys. And Kliff Kingsbury, I didn't want him to begin with. And Scott Shanley said on Twitter, if you're getting Kliff Kingsbury, are you bringing that quarterback with you? Because he's the guy that's making it all work. There's nothing unique about what they're doing over there other than, here, Jaden, pull this play out of your ass. It really was. So much of it was him just making these incredible throws and being incredibly accurate because these guys were not that open unless it's Zach Ertz. And then we saw Philadelphia, much like the Saints, the mystery of covering a tight end is just something they couldn't quite solve. I'm like, man, this is like watching the Saints defense. I guess that's the Vic Fangio aspect of this. I don't know. Not being able to cover a tight end. So Kellen Moore looks like he's going to be the favorite now, and we're putting the gree on him because that means that he probably will not get the job because we're going to talk him up. But it seems like this is the guy they want. This is the guy they want to go for. He wasn't in my top three, but he is now. because I had Glenn and Brady obviously 1-2, and I kind of fell into the trap with everybody else and said, then Mike McCarthy's kind of the third option if they, rather than taking a risk on a young guy they don't know. But the funny thing about Moore for me is he should be what the Saints fans have been saying from the beginning. Let's get a young OC, not a retread, a guy who has nothing to do with the Peyton era,
Mm-hmm.
which he is. He is a guy who's never coached, never been associated with the Saints
Mm-hmm.
or Saints players or other coaches. Um, what do you think of Kellen Moore? What are his strengths and what are his weaknesses?
Truthfully, Alan, a lot of what you said about Kliff Kingsbury, I feel about Kellen Moore. I don't believe, my opinion, I have not seen Kellen Moore. I have not been impressed with Kellen Moore's ability to scheme an offense over the last several years. Certainly not with the Chargers and all that talent that he had last year. Now, granted, he's working for what everybody knew was a lame duck coach. Uh, And yeah, his time in Dallas. Now, maybe you can blame this on McCarthy, who's an offensive guy himself. Maybe it's a combination of McCarthy, Moore, and Dak Prescott, which is probably the most realistic, answer. But I never saw an imaginative offense with the Dallas Cowboys. Even with Philadelphia, and I know people, the critics of Moore are saying, well, he didn't develop, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was already a developed project.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't point to the lack of passing yardage for Philadelphia because they also threw the least amount of times of any team in the NFL. Why? Because they had a 2,000-yard rusher in Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
So if you're a proponent of what Moore does, he does like to run the football. He likes to establish the run. He likes big physical offensive lines, and just likes to have a balanced attack with a lot of play action. That would suit the Saints just fine if they had an offensive line and if they had a deeper backfield. Couple of the needs that we know exist for this team going into this offseason. So I'm not necessarily against the Kellen Moore hire, but I'm not going to say sit here and say, oh, he's the next wonder kid. He's going to take this team to the promised land, going to turn them around. They're going to be a playoff team in a year or two. I'm not necessarily guaranteeing that either. Because Kellen Moore seems to be, for you people, for some of the people that hated Dennis Allen, some of you had the reasoning of Dennis Allen's not a real fiery leader, not a real emotional leader. Well, neither is Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore is more of a strategist, and going to approach it that way. As I've said with several candidates throughout this process, I'm interested to see what Kellen Moore's coaching Rolodex looks like. If Kellen Moore is your hire, he's your offensive guy. I grant you that. Who's going to be your defensive guy? Who's going to be your line coach? What assistants are you going to bring with you? That to me is just as important as the name that they bring in to hire.
Well, one of the names I'm hearing, and this is just something that came out today. If Kellen Moore comes from Philadelphia, he can take one assistant coach with him, and that would be Doug Nussmeier, the former Saints quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
probably is his offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So for you LSU fans, if he doesn't draft a quarterback this year, he may
Oh
draft his
no.
son next year.
Oh, for
Um,
God's sake.
I'm just saying, I don't think that's going to be true because I think that would just be a terrible look. First off, even though it's an LSU guy, unless Nussmeier gets the LSU Tigers to the national championship game and comes home with the trophy, I just can't see them doing something like that. But the name I'm hearing as the assistant he would bring over with him is Garrett Nussmeier, Doug Nussmeier, who actually was a former Saints quarterback. He was a
Mm-hmm.
Saints draft choice in '94 out of Idaho. And he did play in one game, but he was just a career backup and just kind of moved
Yeah.
along.
He was part of the Ditka flying circus.
Yeah, exactly. So, but Doug Nussmeier was an offensive coordinator under Nick Saban at Alabama. I think he went to Georgia too and was with Kirby Smart. I have to go back and look at his resume, but Doug Nussmeier is a good coach.
Yes.
Don't misunderstand me when I'm making these jokes about Garrett Nussmeier. I just had to throw that out there just to set LSU fans off. He is a good coach, and we would be bringing over a good coach from that. I would imagine he would take some of the people from McCarthy's staff out of
Mm-hmm.
Dallas when he was at Dallas, not the guys that were there last year, but the guys
Right.
who were there when they went 12-5. The Hemisphere brought up McCarthy needing a job this cycle and could be a good fit. The interesting thing is Moore was supposed to be the guy to replace McCarthy. McCarthy got wind of that, got jealous of him, and fired him.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a guy running a 12-5 offense, So I get what you're saying, and I have a feeling Saints fans will be aggravated because he's going to be that guy who is very straightforward, not very fiery, not a Sean Payton kind of head coach, but more of an intellectual kind of head coach. And he's just going to be a teacher, and his job is to teach. Now, his mistake, Allen tried to do that, but the mistake he's got to avoid that substitute teacher feel to him by replacing the entire staff. And we're seeing some of that happening already. Kubiak is going to Seattle. I think Hodges is now over in Cincinnati.
Yes.
So it's kind of funny, people were all upset saying, oh, look, they're all abandoning the Saints. But they were all really fired anyway the minute Dennis Allen got fired.
Yeah.
So that's why we started the show talking about the Senior Bowl and Jerry Evans out there not really working for the Saints in name only, not really having a job right now because the head coach position hasn't been filled. And the head coach is going to bring all his people in. So, I mean, who do you think that he would bring in if he could bring some people in? Is there any names that come to mind for you? I know I'm putting you on the spot with that.
Yeah, because I'd certainly need more research. Need to do more research if Moore is indeed the hire. And by the way, and I keep telling people this, don't sleep on Mike Kafka too.
No.
This team really, really likes Mike Kafka. But if Moore is the hire, the first name two names that pop into my head would be on the defensive side from, like you said, his Dallas days, Mike Nolan, Mike Zimmer. I don't know where Mike Zimmer is now. I think Nolan took another year off of football, but those are veteran guys. Those are defensive guys. And with Moore being an offensive guy, I'm not worried about who he's going to fill out on his offensive staff because that's going to be his show. My concern is who you're going to bring in defensively. Do they have a track record? Is that track record successful? What kind of system does the defensive guy run? Are the Saints going to have to completely reshuffle their personnel on that side of the ball? We've seen this kind of show play out before. With Rob Ryan, and Steve Spagnuolo, why they didn't work out during their times in New Orleans. That kind of thing. So I'm going to be watching that one very closely.
Yeah, I am too, because no doubt they were asking him those kind of pointed questions because their draft strategy is really to build a 4-2-5 defense. 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. That'll probably go away, and they may go to a more traditional 4-3. They may go to what Philadelphia runs, a hybrid 3-4,
Mm-hmm.
where they rotate people in, and you would use now a guy like a Nolan Smith, or you
Mm-hmm.
would end up using Foskey maybe as get him to drop a little weight and play a stand-up linebacker pass rusher who
Mm-hmm.
comes in on third downs to rush the quarterback. You don't know, and that's going to be the interesting thing. I did hear if Kafka does get, I keep butchering this man's name, it's Kafka, right?
Kafka, no L,
Kafka.
no L.
Kafka.
Yes.
Yes. Like the author. I just got to remember that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the name I've heard associated with him, speaking of defense, is Wink Martindale as defensive coordinator, which, Giant fans are rolling their eyes at. But when he was with the Ravens, that was a good defense, Some people say he's more like Wade Phillips. He gets a lot of success early, and then teams start figuring out what he likes to do, and it kind of fades. But I mean, that's an interesting hookup because I've always liked Wink Martindale.
Same.
I liked his defensive schemes, like how aggressive he is, and I think he would fit this defense.
Yeah.
And the personnel of this defense are not radically changing it. You're turning your guys a little more loose, and I think you would get more coaches, more coaching than what you got out of Joe Woods and that whole group, and Todd Grantham and those people who just were not very good coaches.
No.
Yeah, and even Cam Jordan came out and said that. You want to know why my sacks were down? Because he wasn't teaching anybody or developing anybody on how to be pass rushers at all. It wasn't until he was gone that I got to be turned loose again, So I'm not as washed up as you think I am. So, and that's something else to think about. Yeah, these players are older, Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and so forth, but how much of it was the scheme and how much of it was age? We don't really know. I mean, we have a good idea, but I'm not trying to say they're going to return to their Pro Bowl form at all. But I'm saying that maybe they're a little more productive than the coaching allowed.
I could see that. I can absolutely see that. Cam coming into this year, you and I were talking about him like, okay, he's not an every down player anymore, and it's a mistake to try to force him to be. But he could still be an effective player if used on a rotational basis or used in a situational basis. And, once Grantham was let go, we saw more of that play out, and Cam was extremely effective. Demario, it's clear that Davis has lost a step, but it's just as clear that he is still a very, very good linebacker. And, he was rendered ineffective a lot of times by the just piss poor play of the line in front of him, not keeping blockers off of him, or not creating creases for him to read and shoot through. So as a result, him and Warner both had to take uncharacteristic gambles rather than just relying on their instincts.
Yeah, and Rizzi was another player. You're talking about not getting the development that you need. Rizzi could very well be that guy as well. He wasn't getting the development he needed, and it wasn't. You noticed after Grantham was gone, Rizzi seemed to pick it up. Chase Young picked it up. Chase Young wasn't out there for the majority of the snaps. They rotated him with Cam Jordan, and you got more production out of Chase Young. So, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, saying that it is players, but it's also scheme. And you look at Zach Bond exploding over there in Philadelphia. Granted, he is playing where he's got great defensive linemen in front of him that keep him clean, and he's got a lot of room to roam. But we did not develop Zach Bond like we should have. We made the decision not to sign Trey Hendrickson because that coaching staff, Dennis Allen, I'm throwing him under the bus on this one, but he said that he was a try-hard player. He was not as talented as you thought he looked. Well, clearly he's proven that wrong. And
And I get that. I don't want to go into too much of this, but I do get the thinking, because the draft nerds will tell you, rather than pay a guy who you don't really believe in, you should draft a guy, especially in the first round, get that 5-year cheap contract. You get 5 years of a rookie basically playing on a cheap contract who should be able to duplicate what you're paying this other guy for, who's older. And if you hit it right, it looks brilliant, and you don't have the cap problems. If you miss, though, now you have to get that second and third contract to these older players. Now that's how you get the cap problem that you're in.
Exactly. That's why you had to pay Marcus Davenport. That's why you had to reach on draft picks like Peyton Turner and Isaiah Foskey, and exact situations like this, like you just laid out. That's also why we saw Kool-Aid McKinstry drafted in the second round last year. The Saints knew the dilemma that they were facing with Marshawn Lattimore's contract and Paulson Adebo approaching free agency. So now you have now you have McKinstry in tow. So you have the luxury of moving on from Lattimore in a poor year and taking a cap hit for the next 2 seasons, a smaller cap hit for the next 2 seasons. While you sit here and you don't have to now say, oh my God, we traded Lattimore. We have no choice but to pay or franchise tag Paulson Adebo. While I still think that that's on the table, you don't have to, because you have a Kool-Aid McKinstry. So that's one situation where it worked out for you.
Right. And that's that ideally, that's what you want to do every time, because that's how you get to be better. The Eagles are in their second Super Bowl in 3 years, in large part because they turned over that roster that won the Super Bowl with Doug Peterson and Nick Foles. They were able to rebuild that team with young players. So you have a very young roster, and you're not paying these guys yet. So that helps out tremendously. They did it right. The Saints did it wrong. And that's why they're where they are, and that's why we are where we are. And it's so many different things. It's not just simply a matter of, okay, replace the general manager and you'll be a better team if you get a better general manager. You have to look at the scouting department too. You have to look at the the player personnel guys. Are you pulling in the right players? Are we signing the right free agents to fill in our needs? And the coaches too. Are you getting the kind of players that you need to build the team accordingly? You and I have both complained for a long time about this team not bringing in tight ends, and how tight ends are such an important weapon. And we see that. Look at the 4 teams that win the playoffs this year.
Right. Goddard.
All of them had great teams.
Kelsey, Ertz, and Kincaid up in Buffalo.
Yeah. All of them important positions on the field because they bail out their quarterbacks on third down. Good Lord, the Philadelphia could not figure out how to cover their former teammate, Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz had 100 and something yards. And that every time it got to be third down with the Chiefs, that defense, Buffalo's defense, was all over Kelsey, because they weren't going to let Kelsey get him, because they knew Kelsey was the threat on third down. Eventually, Kelsey did start getting his catches later in the game. But they knew Kelsey was the guy we had to stop. This guy here, that was a major weapon for Drew Brees. 15 touchdowns his second to last year here, or his last year here. I think it was in 2013. He had 15 touchdowns. Something ungodly. No Saints receiver's gotten 15 touchdowns. None in the history of this franchise. No one's gotten that many touchdowns in one season.
Nope. And then, like you said about the Bills and Kelsey, the Bills were very aware of Kelsey early on, and that opened up opportunities for Worthy and some of those other guys. that wouldn't have otherwise been there necessarily. When the Bills adjusted as the game went on, that opened up the opportunities for Kelsey. And we talked about the Final Four NFL teams this year. Look at Minnesota. They were a playoff team. T.J. Hawkinson. You look at Detroit. Sam Laporta, Kittle. With the 49ers the previous couple of years. Tight ends, Njoku, the only decent weapon for the Cleveland Browns. I could name a couple others. The Saints blatantly ignoring the tight end. It's like they watch our shows Under the Dome and Bayou Blitz, especially around the draft time, and they go the exact opposite of what we're calling and begging and reasoning for.
Enough for the George Costanza. It's not opposite day. We're not going to do the opposite. I mean, maybe they should do the opposite of some of the other players, but not the tight ends. I mean.
But it's such an archaic way of thinking, though. We just named several teams that have had sustained offensive success because of, or in part of the reasoning for, because of the tight end spot. And then you look at what the Saints have. I love Foster Moreau, but he's not the guy that you need to build your tack around. No, he's not the guy keeping defensive coordinators up late at night. That's the kind of guy you need.
Well, going back to Kellen Moore, if you watch, speaking of tight ends, how many times did a direct snap to Dallas Goedert, the Eagles? I'm looking at that going, and of course, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of I'm a Saints fan, but I'm looking at that play going, there's a Taysom Hill play right there. That's Taysom Hill. That's exactly what they do with Taysom Hill. They just did it with Goddard. That's all. But same basic idea. So, to me, getting a tight end, and I'm looking at that kid from Penn State, Tyler Warren, getting a guy like him, my God, how much that would help out whoever the quarterback is. I mean, if it's Carr, if it's Rattler, if it's a draft pick this year, whatever they do for a quarterback, a tight end, a good receiving tight end is your quarterback's best friend. The other best friend is a running game. And you get a tight end that come over the middle, and you got a running game where you can get 1,000-yard rusher, 1,500-yard rusher, somebody who's getting 9 and 10 touchdowns that makes that safety come down in the box. It opens up so much more for your passing game. I mean, there's so many things that need to be fixed on the Saints offense, and some of it is a philosophical approach they took. Some of it is a lack of talent and age, but so much of it is just I want to see a coach, and this is what I do like about Kellen Moore. I want to see a coach that commits to a certain philosophy. This is how I'm going to build my team. If it's going to be a running-based team, which is good when you play in cold weather, when you're on the road, give me a stable of running backs where I'm beating the hell out of you with the running game. And then when I have these games where I take the lead late in a game, my defense just needs to get me the ball back. We can run the clock out because I know my running backs are going to carry this for me. And it can't be Alvin Kamara running up the middle. It just can't be that. It's got to be somebody who has breakaway speed, but also has the power to go inside and create and get yards after contact. That's not Kamara's game. Saquon Barkley. You and I both agree that Saquon Barkley should be the league MVP.
100%.
I mean, 3 touchdowns last week. Sunday. I know that doesn't count towards the MVP discussion, but my God. The Eagles aren't going to the Super Bowl without Saquon Barkley. They just aren't, because that offense was not strong enough. They needed Saquon Barkley to help do all the other things they wanted to do. Yep. They protected a kind of a weak passer in Jalen Hurts. Barkley, first drive of the game, he goes 80 yards for a touchdown. First 2 drives of the game, he's scoring. He scored 3 touchdowns total, including the one that closed it out.
Yeah, and I mean, Saquon's a 2,000-yard rusher. There's been 8 9 2,000-yard seasons in the history of the NFL. He's the MVP. Everybody knows they're going to give it to a quarterback, whether deserve it or not. But it's been, and because of that, it's become a farce of an award, much like the Heisman Trophy is. Saquon Barkley deserved the offensive MVP as much as anyone ever has since Drew Brees in 2011.
Well, it's become the quarterback award now because quarterbacks are the draw. Quarterbacks are the sexy thing. Quarterbacks are the ones everybody wants to see. You'll never see a defensive player get it again. I think the last did Aaron Donald get it one year?
I don't know. The last one I for sure remember getting it was LT Lawrence Taylor in '86.
Yeah.
But I don't know if anybody has gotten it since.
Let me just look that up real quick because I know the last running back was LaDainian Tomlinson back in 2006. He got the MVP because that was the year they were talking about maybe they might have a split MVP because Tomlinson and Drew Brees, and he just gave it to LaDainian Tomlinson. All right, let's see. I know it's been okay. This is going to go backwards, so I don't want to go all the way. I don't want me telling you Blood McNally won it one year. It's not going to tell you anything. Let's see. Yeah, Sean Alexander got it in 2005. LaDainian got it in 2006. Those are the last two running back. Oh, Adrian Peterson in 2012.
A 2,000-yard rusher. Yeah.
Other than that, it's been all quarterbacks. So Adrian Peterson is the last running back to get it in 2012. Since then, it's been Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan. What a joke. Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. It's been all quarterbacks. So, yeah. And the last defensive guy who got it, golly, Rich Gannon got it in 2002. Last defensive guy who got it. Wow. I'm going back. I keep going. LT in 86. The last defensive guy who ever got it. Mark Mosley.
Oh, yeah, 1982.
Yeah, a kicker got it. And that was for the consecutive made field goals. And he was a straight-on kicker with a weird fetish for socks. He wore like 4 socks on his kicking foot. Let me see. Larry Brown. Is that the safety?
Are the Redskins running back?
Running back. Larry Brown, running back. Okay, yeah. I'm thinking of Alan
Cowboys.
Page. Yeah. Alan Page got it in 71, so that's a defensive player. Yeah, a lot of quarterbacks. Jim Taylor in 62, Paul Hornung in 61, a lot of Jim Brown. And then, yeah, the award didn't exist prior to 57. Looks like it was something. It was called something else. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of quarterbacks. Quarterback award. But yeah, it would be nice to see him just shock the world and give it to Saquon Barkley. But it's the era of the quarterback, so it's gonna be worse than ever. Now, I was thinking of the safety from the Cardinals, number 8, who played with 2 broken hands and still got a lot of interceptions. Not Larry Smith. I can't think of him right now. I could just picture him with the 2 broken hands, and he picked up all his pads. Yes, he was on the plane. He was on the plane with Miss Benson. Yes, because he is the leader of the crew that is picking this head coach. It's Loomis, Benson, I think Dennis Lauscha is involved with the picking. Ziegler was involved. I don't know when Ziegler's going to his new job. He may be leaving shortly. Once they make the selection, I think that's when he leaves. Mueller is part of this group too. So it's not just one person. It's a group of them that are all interviewing him, interviewing all these coaches. That's another thing. We didn't talk about that. So Ziegler was the former GM of the Oakland Raiders, came in Las Vegas Raiders now, but he came over last year with Dennis Allen to help out with the draft and be an advisor. Randy Mueller was brought over this year. Now, Ziegler left and went to be assistant GM for what team again?
Tennessee,
assistant GM. And once again, the usual suspects are like, oh my God, look, he's leaving now too. He was an advisor for the Saints. So he really didn't have a job. I mean, they paid him, but it was kind of like you're a contract for hire guy. You know, there's things we want you to do, but other than that, you're not really involved in day-to-day decisions for the Saints. So he basically got a job and a promotion from what he's doing now. So he's not really leaving. I mean, he is leaving, but he's not leaving because the ship is sinking. He's leaving because, like you or I would do, hey, I got another job with another place, you know, doing what I want to do. I'm being a GM maybe again one day. So, I mean, it's a good thing. It's a promotion. And I look at that the same way with these assistant coaches that are leaving and going to other places. Dennis Allen is now going to be defense coordinator for the Bears. I was told on social media that the Saints coaches were bad, the GMs are bad, everything's bad. So
get rid of everybody. They all suck.
Yeah, why are they getting jobs elsewhere?
Right, and it's many of the same people saying all these things. All the coaches are, all the coaches suck. They're all the problem. Get rid of them all. And then when they leave, oh my God, nobody wants to be here. This is the worst place on earth to work for. A, which is it? And B, I'll answer that for you. It's neither. Ziegler, as you said, got a promotion. The type of promotion any one of us walking the face of the earth would take. It's a promotion in title and undoubtedly a significant bump in pay. Kubiak going to Seattle, Hodges going to Cincinnati. As you put it earlier, and as you and I have said many, many times on social media to people who are pressing these panic buttons, these guys essentially did not have a job as soon as the last game of the regular season ended. Yeah. It is very, very rare, and I mean lottery type winning rare, that an assistant coach from a fired staff is brought back by a newly hired coach. It just doesn't happen, guys. These guys were all given green lights to, guys, you're welcome to go out and seek other employment. That's basically them being told you're no longer welcome here. We'll keep your name on the office door until the new guy comes in. But when the new guy comes in, your name's coming off of that office door and we're changing the locks. It's as simple as that. Frankly, I think only the fact that Kubiak and Hodges have left so far, Rizzi has gotten interviews too. He's waiting to see what happens with the Saints. The fact that Joe Woods has not even gotten spoken to, Marcus Robertson, some of these other guys. You and I were both fans of John Denton, the line coach. Yeah. But none of these other guys have even gotten interviews. That should tell you something about the state of the coaching staff.
Well, and of course, Senior Bowl this weekend is a job fair. All these assistant coaches go out to Senior Bowl and they start talking to other coaches, other staffs, and saying, "Hey, can you think you can use me? Look, I could help out with this and that." And that is a job fair. So it's all expected. And like I said earlier, part of Dennis Allen's problem was that he took too long to replace the staff that Peyton had because he was looked at as a substitute teacher because these weren't his people. These weren't, and I'm not saying that Allen would have picked better coaches. I think he waited too long to replace Carmichael, for example. You know, I thought he made a mistake replacing. I just drew a blank on his name. The defensive line coach. He was at Jacksonville and
Ryan Nielsen.
Atlanta. Ryan Nielsen.
Hell yeah!
Instead of keeping Ryan Nielsen, he replaced him with Grantham. But some of the other moves were needed. You know, you should not have brought in Doug Marrone. You should have brought a better offensive line coach in, and so forth. So, I mean, Dennis Allen made a lot of mistakes, but that was one of his biggest ones, and I think that was part of his downfall in New Orleans, was that the players looked at him as a substitute teacher. His staff wasn't really his staff. It took him 2 years to figure that out. Just those kind of things. So this new coach, whoever it will be, is going to bring in his people. And unless you're a Rick Venturi, because Rick Venturi, when you were saying that, how lucky you would have to be part of staff, Rick Venturi somehow, some way, ended up being part of 3 different staffs. He was. I think Rick hid in the ductwork whenever the offices were cleared out, and then dropped down in when the new guy came in.
I'll
tell you,
talk about George Costanza when George quit his job in a rage, and then changed his mind and showed back up on Monday like nothing happened. That was Rick Venturi.
Well, they tried to lock him out of his office, and he found different ways to get in there, and he was still in there. He would not leave. Yeah, it was that toy company, I think. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Rick Venturi was the defensive coordinator, an assistant defensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, I think, under Jim Mora. Then he stayed on with Ditka's team, and he was the interim head coach for Mora. Stayed on with Ditka's team, and somehow he came back, or was still linebackers coach, then became defensive coordinator under Haslett when Ron Zook left. So, you know, and I was like, oh my God, we can't get rid of this dude. Because I still remember him with the Colts. And I'm like, he was bad with the Colts. I don't want him here anymore. You know, so yeah. I would be very, very surprised if there's anybody left when Kellen Moore or whomever takes over. The one coach we have not talked about, or the one coaching candidate we have not talked about, we didn't talk much about Anthony Weaver either, but I want to talk about this guy here, Mike McCarthy. McCarthy is the last name on the list of people to be interviewed. Mm-hmm. That is the name that all the talking heads on NFL Network and FS1 and every sports radio show you can think of. Oh, Mike McCarthy is going to be the new Saints head coach. Watch this. You know, Mike Florio was out there looking all disheveled, put on his toupee, and even bragged about that. Put on his toupee at Friday night at 11 o'clock at night to do his little 20-minute rant about the Cowboys hiring Schottenheimer. And the last thing he said was, you know, I think McCarthy should get the job in New Orleans. Well, McCarthy had an opening interview, the virtual interview, and evidently he did not impress. In fact, there are some people in that group of people who are interviewing coaches for the Saints who did not like him. And I wonder if one of them is Randy Mueller, the guy who hired him way back when, back in 2000 to be the offensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy then came out today via a talking head on ESPN and said, you know, well, I don't like what's going on over there, and I want more power, and I want to be basically the GM, and, you know, I need to restructure the thing, and I want a long contract and all these things to try and spin this as it's not me, it's you. Kind of the opposite of George Costanza. But yeah, It's not me that's the problem. It's you guys are the problem. Y'all just don't recognize my genius. What do you make of this with Mike McCarthy?
First of all, and you and I have said this about Mike from the start, he has been the fallback option for the Saints. Mm-hmm. He was from the minute he reached the unemployment line, because, folks, if he was the Saints' first option, or even say second option after Aaron Glenn, this would have been a done deal already.
Oh, yeah.
Period and end of story. The national talking heads and a lot of you guys on social media that were saying, oh, it's going to be McCarthy, whether for better or for worse, you were saying it's going to be McCarthy. That you were being lazy. The national heads were being lazy. They were only saying McCarthy because that's the guy that used to work for the Saints. So of course it's going to be this guy. Yeah, you needed to look a little bit deeper. And like I said, it's the minute if McCarthy was indeed their first or even second option after Aaron Glenn, or hell, even third option after Glenn and after Brady, then the deal would have been done. And instead, they keep pushing back his interview, and they keep saying, we'll talk to him when we talk to him. That's told me that from the very start, he was the fallback guy. He was the panic button. Him or Darren Rizzi are the panic button. If you guys on social media are right, and literally nobody wants to work for us, then I guess we'll just bring back Rizzi or hire Mike McCarthy. That's been the category that Mike has been this entire time. I'm willing to bet a paycheck on it.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. I think McCarthy is basically Dennis Allen redone. Not as bad as Allen, because clearly he's got a winning record and all that. He's a much better head coach than Dennis Allen is. But as far as perception, all we're doing is bringing a familiar name back. We're not really doing the legwork. We're not going to pick the risky option. We're picking the safe option because we just want to keep doing what we're doing, to borrow a phrase from Dennis Allen, and we think we can win with this roster. We don't want to risk changing a whole heck of a lot. We're just going to tweak it a little bit. All the things that the fans say they hate about what the Saints are going to do. To me, if you're bringing in any of these other candidates, Weaver even, or more, any of these guys that are outside of the Sean Payton, Mickey Loomis era, of assistants and things like that, you are definitely changing everything about what you do. You're changing your roster. You're getting somebody who has no loyalty to any of the players in this roster. That's what you claim that you want anyway. So why would I want to go and get the safe option, i.e., McCarthy? Why wouldn't I shoot for the stars and take a shot at these guys? Because what's the worst that can happen? The worst can happen is they stink. We're back to this 3 years later, and Loomis is gone, and it's now, it's really panic time. But, to me, Loomis is looking at this like, this is going to be my last hire as GM. I need to look for a Sean Payton kind of guy, not a Dennis Allen kind of guy, not a comfortable pair of shoes. I'm going out there and taking the risk of getting a guy. So, to me, Mike McCarthy just brings in a lot of the old recycled coaches that he's worked with in the past. And this team doesn't go out and draft a quarterback, doesn't go out there. It tries to win as much as they can with the roster that they've got with very few changes. So I don't want Mike McCarthy for that. I don't want him to be the fallback option or I guess we got to take him now because Moore pulled out and Weaver, we don't like him enough. And Mike over there went back to the Giants. And, I don't want that option. I want them to take a risk. And I think those two guys, Moore and Kafka, are the two guys I like the most. They're the two guys I think I would like to see the Saints take risk on and go after, as opposed to picking the old comfortable pair of shoes and going with McCarthy. And I think all the shit that's out there right now, because first off, the insiders don't know shit about what's going on with the Saints.
Right.
They really don't. I said this on Twitter. I think I said this on Facebook. You'd have an easier time getting nuclear codes out of the United States missiles than you would getting news about what they're thinking and doing in the front office. They just don't talk. They don't tell people. So you've got all these insiders just basically All right, I got
It's
5-10 minutes to fill on. Yeah, I got 5 or 10 minutes to fill on this show, because all we do on our shows are have discussions about discussions. We don't actually put any kind of programming on.
Mhm.
It's just all talking head shows. So I got to say something about the Saints. So I'm gonna try and sound intelligent and say basically nothing for 10 minutes. Or figure out a way to pivot this into something that I actually know something about. Like, yeah, McCarthy got let go from the Cowboys, and he may be the front runner of the Saints. But speaking of the Cowboys, let's talk about Brian Schottenheimer and spend the next 20 minutes talking about that. I mean, that's just the reality. That's the way it works on these national shows now. You guys remember when Sean Payton and Drew Brees were here? How many times we heard Sean Payton was going to Dallas? Sean Payton sold his house because he and his wife are getting divorced, and he bought a house in Dallas. That means Sean's going to Dallas because Sean used to work for Dallas, and don't you know that's what's going to happen? Well, it never happened. It never happened.
Sean's going to the New York Jets. Breeze is going to the New York Jets. Every single year for literally 6 straight years. And someone that when Peyton finally resigned, after the 2021 season, I don't remember. I think it was Rappaport. That threw out one of his initial blind squirrel gets a nut things. And I blasted him, as I always did. Then Sean, lo and behold, finally quit. And a couple people came back at me, saying, you owe Ian Rappaport an apology. The hell I do. He's been saying this shit for 8 years. Of course, he's bound to be right. Eventually, if nothing else, Sean was going to drop over from old age. And Rappaport would have been right that Sean Payton's leaving the Saints. So that's all these national people do. And Alan, myself, Brendan, we all try to tell you guys about it year after year after year. When it comes to free agency and the draft too, do not pay attention to the national media, particularly when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. They are absolutely clueless. They're lazy, and they don't bother to do research whatsoever, because that's not one of the glorified teams, in the National Football League. So it's not because the Saints are bad now. It's just because they aren't one of the main markets that the NFL likes to promote.
You were in one of the smallest NFL markets. If Green Bay didn't exist, the Saints and Buffalo would be the 2 smallest NFL markets in the league. You don't have an interesting, colorful history like the Cowboys or the Giants or the Jets, even though it's been 50 plus years since Joe Namath won that Super Bowl for the AFL Jets. That's still the New York market. You're not in California, so you're not. The Chargers have more interest in the media than the Saints do. Think about the Arizona Cardinals. How much do we really hear about the Arizona Cardinals? Can you even name 5 players in the Arizona Cardinals if you don't play fantasy football? Seattle Seahawks, very little discussion goes on over there. But man, they sure do love them some Pittsburgh Steelers. They sure love the Philadelphia Eagles. They love Washington. The NFC East has always been the topic. Even when the NFC East is bad. Yeah, they're going to talk about why are they so bad. The old black and blue division: Minnesota, Chicago, Detroit, Green Bay. Green Bay's got Lombardi. Green Bay has the history. Titletown, USA. They're going to talk about Green Bay. In fact, I'm jumping all over the place, but these remind me of things. They had a story that came out on Twitter. They had some clown from some clickbait site put the list of all-time best free agent signings. I'm looking at the pictures they got up there. You know who's missing from those things?
It's no doubt Drew Brees.
Yeah, you've got Reggie White, which is legit because Reggie White made Green Bay an acceptable place for players to go because Green Bay was not a very good team. Deion Sanders of the 49ers. They had Saquon Barkley in there. Let me see. pull this picture out real quick and make sure I get everybody, because I was like, when I saw Dion, I'm like, why is Dion in there? The 49ers team he went to was loaded. You know, I mean, it was just ridiculous. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Peyton Manning going to Denver and Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay. Those were the top NFL free agent signings that immediately paid off. And of course, the guy got blasted. They said, "Where's Drew Brees?" He's like, "Oh, he didn't have an immediate impact." I'm like, "The hell he didn't!" It was the first NFC Championship game the franchise ever went to.
They went from 3-13 to an NFC to a division championship to the first conference title game in team history. But no, comeback player of the year. Yeah, you thought his career was done after arm surgery, the reconstructive arm surgery, but no, he didn't have an immediate impact.
I mean, of this list, Reggie White, Deion Sanders, the 49ers, Peyton Manning going to the Broncos, Tom Brady going to the Bucks, and Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles. Like I said, I'm taking Deion out because Deion was a nice piece. He was a completed piece, but good God, that whole team. Ricky Jackson was on that team, but Steve Young, Jerry Rice, Ricky Waters, that was that offense. The defense, they pulled in Ken Norton from the 49ers. They pulled in Gary Plummer from the Chargers. That whole team was loaded. Charles Mann from the Redskins. That team was loaded. He wasn't the difference. He didn't put them over the top.
No, he was a mercenary.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you know what? If you look at the roster for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Brady came over, and for that matter, even the Denver Broncos when they got Manning, Manning and Brady were really both the missing pieces because those rosters were stacked. Those rosters were built to win right now. Reggie White, when he went to the Packers, transformed them from also-rans into legitimate perennial playoff contenders. Drew Brees did the same thing, same exact thing with the New Orleans Saints.
Yep.
That's what I thought the free agency was meant to do, was transform a team like that.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Green Bay, and we've talked about this when we talked about the Steeler way and the Saints way. Green Bay suffering the Lombardi shadow that Peyton, I think, is throwing on this franchise too. I just got a flash. Mike McCarthy just pulled his name out of the coaching hire. That tells me basically the Saints said thanks, but no thanks. So now he's just like when we started the show talking about Kliff Kingsbury. They basically said, we'll call you later. If we call you at all. Here's my, and I'm gonna get back to my point with Drew Brees in a minute and free agency, but here's the thing I wanted to say. What I think is going to be the timeline we're going to be looking at this week. We're probably going to see the Saints working with Moore, getting a contract hammered out, and these are the deals. This is the details we're going to do.
If it's not Moore, it's Kafka.
Yeah. And Moore's got a Super Bowl to prepare for, so he's going to want this thing buttoned up pretty much by the weekend, which is fine because the Saints, I think, will do that. There won't be any Saints news, obviously. There might be leaks this weekend, but there's no real NFL news. Super Bowl week happens Friday before the Super Bowls when you're going to start getting the Ian Rappaports and some of those people saying, looks like the Saints are down to two candidates. They're trying to put a contract together before they make the offer to Moore or Kafka, one of those two. And Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, is going to be the Jay Glazer report. Looks like the Saints are going to announce that, and I'm going to say for the sake of argument, Moore, since it's that game. The Saints are going to hire Moore immediately after the Super Bowl is over with. They'll fly him to New Orleans, and he'll be there Monday morning. That's going to be your timeline. because, and the same is true for Kafka. If he's the guy, he's going to be the guy that.
If it's Kafka, it's actually going to be before the Super Bowl. You can almost guarantee that.
Yeah.
But even though I keep telling people don't sleep on Kafka, they really like him. I also think that there was a reason why there wasn't a move made before the conference title games, is because they had their eyes on one of these guys, whether it was Brady, Kingsbury, or Moore. It turned out to be Moore, especially when Brady basically said leading up to the weekend, he pulled his name out. So it turned out that their focus was on Moore rather than Kingsbury. And they, again, with the Saints, kind of what you were just saying, with the Saints, don't pay attention to the talking heads. Pay attention to what the Saints do and don't do. The Saints boarded a plane Monday, as soon as they could on Monday, to fly to Philadelphia to interview Kellen Moore. You don't do that unless you have heavy interest in a guy. You just kind of sit back and say, well, we're trying to get something scheduled, like maybe they were with Kingsbury or maybe they were with Brady. No, they boarded a plane and flew to Kellen Moore's house to interview him. Right. That tells you a hell of a lot more than anything the national media have been saying.
Absolutely. And I think that's why McCarthy can read it. They probably told McCarthy too, look, we're going to go in a different direction. Here's the thing about Kafka. So this is Nick Underhill's writing, so I'm going to give him credit. But, the thing they like about him is his leadership and X's and O's. So don't worry about the fact he had the play calling duties ripped away from him, because that's what happens to guys that are losing. Head coaches are like, if I'm going down with me calling the play. And I think you mentioned that last week. But you said the people who've seen this Giants offensive coordinator in action say he's a great leader with a fantastic presence while leading the room. He looks like an angry Mr. Clean. He's bald.
He does.
He's really tall.
I love it.
Yeah. They say his X's and O's are great. He puts together good game plans, and losing play calling duties isn't really something that is reflected on him. It's things that happen when they're losing. They just do. So, I would be happy with either one. You're getting the offensive coach that you wanted. They're swinging for the fences. Kellen Moore is only 36 years old. He will be the youngest coordinator the Saints have ever, or head coach the Saints have ever hired, because he'd be younger than Sean Payton was when he came here.
Yeah, Kafka's 37.
37. So so you're looking at a very young coach. In fact, I think they said Moore is 6 months older than Demario Davis, which is amazing to think about. But yeah, it will be an interesting event when either of these guys get hired. And Kafka will be the first minority head coach the Saints have ever hired, because he's of Puerto Rican descent. So the Giants would get an extra third-round pick, I believe, for a minority coach getting hired. So it'd be interesting. I think Bob froze on me, because I'm looking at a surprise face in one screen, and I'm looking at a serious face in the other. So it looks like Bob froze on me. I'm gonna, he just dropped out. He should be coming back in a second. As soon as he comes back in, we're gonna be wrapping up anyway. But either way, with McCarthy dropping out, we're looking at a brand new head coaching system, head coaching philosophy, the whole bit. I'm looking forward to it, because I think this is the fresh opportunity people have been begging the Saints for. This is going to be a restart of the entire franchise, and this coach would have no loyalty to any of the players on this roster. So the guys who want Derek Carr gone, it's a possibility that could happen with this coach, either of the coaches. The guys who want the old players to be phased out, that's a very real possibility. The last thing I ever wanted to say about any of this is that don't let the cap issues bother you, because the cap issue, you can't tell me of a single player or a single move the Saints have ever wanted to make where the salary cap hindered them from doing it. If they want to make a move and eat dead money, they will do it. Think about this guy here, Jimmy Graham. They traded him the year after they just paid him. And the same with Junior Gillette. They cut him even though they paid him and had to eat those cap figures. They will figure out a way around these things. There's Bob, I think.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Well, all I know is that you on one screen, I've got my main screen. I hear you had a surprised look on your face, and the other screen you had a serious look. So I don't know what's going on. So I'm right now looking at your ceiling fan.
Yeah, I'm bundling up, getting ready to go out in the elements.
I got you. Well, I was just saying to wrap up the show, basically, you're going to get what you want. You're going to get a new coach out there who has no loyalty to any of the players or any of the front office people. And do not let the cap issues worry you that they won't. If they want to make a move, they're going to make moves. They will figure out ways to work around the cap. And I listed Jimmy Graham getting traded and Junior Gillette getting cut despite having to eat that cap dollars. If the new coach wants these guys gone because he wants this guy in on this team, the Saints will do it. So basically, to wrap up the show, Bayou Blitz tomorrow, or is it going to be Thursday?
Alan, is looking like it's going to be Thursday.
Okay.
I know Brendan is on the road for business again. We'll make an announcement probably mid to late afternoon if it is going to be on Thursday, but it seems like we're leaning right now. Okay.
And I know it's basically the same thing we just talked about, coaching, and so forth. Senior Bowl this weekend, though. We're going to talk a little about that next week because hopefully the coach has been picked by then. Anybody in the Senior Bowl that you really like that you may want people to watch for this weekend?
The pass rushers. There's a couple of edge rushers, from SEC and Big 12 schools, to watch a little bit closely. I don't remember who the edge rusher is a deeper class. No real flashy names outside of Abdul Carter from Penn State. But it looks like to me, from what I've scouted so far, anyway, that you could get a quality edge rusher deep into day 2 that could be a day 1 starter, and a couple of those guys are going to be at the Senior Bowl. Watch for those guys, and watch for interior linemen too. God knows we know it's a need for the Saints, and you don't typically see interior linemen, offensive linemen declare early. So a lot of those guys are seniors and are going to be at these postseason bowl games. So watch for reports coming out of the practices about who's performing well in the trenches. Those could be, if it's an edge rusher, it could be a sleeper for the Saints in day 1, or possible or potential target in day 2.
Absolutely. And just for the quarterback watching, Jalen Milroe had a terrible game, a terrible practice. He was like 0 for 8 and just really, really bad. And the name that unfortunately is surprising a lot of people, got a lot of people watching, is Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. I don't want Dart. I don't like him. I know I talked about Corral a few years ago, but I've really soured on Lane Kiffin's system. And quarterbacks coming in that system, they're just not ready to play. So, I'm going to be on Team Will Howard for a while. Because his playoff run was something to watch. He really stepped up in the playoff run. I still think he's a day 3 pick. He may get bumped into the 3rd round. But he's the guy I kind of like right now as far as quarterbacks. The rest of it, I'm like you. I'm watching the.
I'm a Dylan Gabriel guy.
Okay. That's a good one. I'm gonna get deeper into it as well, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm watching interior line play. I'm watching defensive tackle and defensive end.
Mhm.
You know, those are the big three for me. The receivers are always going to be there, but it's really that's where I want to see the improvement in first. So, Senior Bowl this weekend, Super Bowl next weekend. We'll talk about whoever the new coach may be if they make the announcement next week. If not, we'll talk Senior Bowl and Super Bowl. So check out the Bayou Blitz Thursday night, and we'll see you next week on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.